te va a meter con chancleta y palos de escoba. Así que no te me pongas majadero, porque yo vengo con apetito de obrero a comerme a cualquiera que venga a robarme lo mío. Yo soy el Napoleón del caserío. Oye, esto se lo dedico a los que trabajan con un sueldo bajito, pa' darle de comer a su pollito. Yo quiero a mi barrio como Tito quiere a Caimito. Yo no lucho por un terreno pavimentado, ni por metros cuadrados, ni por un sueño dorado. Yo lucho por un paisaje bien perfumado y por un buen plato de bistec encebollado. Por la sonrisa de mi madre que vale 1.000.000. Lucho por mi abuela meciéndose en su sillón. Lucho por unos pinchos al carbón y por lo bonito que se ve la perla desde un avión. Oye, dile.
Allá abajo en el hueco, en el boquete, nacen flores por ramillete. Casita de colores con la ventana abierta, vecina de la playa, puerta con puerta. Aquí yo tengo de todo, no me falta nada. Tengo la noche que me sirve de sábana.
Tengo los mejores paisajes del cielo. Tengo una neverita repleta de cerveza con hielo.
Allá abajo en el hueco, en el boquete, nacen flores por ramillete. Casita de colores con la ventana abierta, vecina de la playa, puerta con puerta. Aquí yo tengo de todo, no me falta nada. Tengo la noche que me sirve de sábana.
Tengo los mejores paisajes del cielo. Tengo una neverita repleta de cerveza con hielo. Oye, esto fue por la inocencia de Jonathan Román. La chilinga desde Argentina. Estamos calentando motores. Dale.
Esa risa en la perla, la escucho en el Chorrillo y de Tepito hasta el Callao. Y donde sea que hayan chiquillos, creo en barrios con madres que vivieron iguales razones y al final se murieron sin tener vacaciones. Como decía mi abuela, así fue la baraja en casa del pobre, hasta el que feto trabaja. Por eso el barrio eterno, también universal, y el que se mete con mi barrio, me cae mal.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Veo las luces de la perla desde Panamá.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Brillando en clave morse y me invitan para allá.
La noche me sirve de
un
sábana.
Camino hecho de estrellas, semáforo la luna.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Salí a las 7:30 y voy llegando a la 1.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Nena, frótame con Big Papa, como me hacía mamá.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Y dormido me olvido de mi identidad.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
El hombre bueno no teme a la oscuridad.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Y no me falta más nada.
Allá abajo en el hueco, en el boquete, nacen flores por ramillete. Casita de colores con la ventana abierta, vecina de la playa, puerta con puerta. Aquí yo tengo de todo, no me falta nada. Tengo la noche que me sirve de sábana.
Esa pared del barrio, y esto es pa' que te asombre. 50 años más tarde todavía guarda mi nombre. Aquí no se perdona el tonto majadero, aquí de nada vale tu apellido, tu dinero. Se respeta el carácter de la gente con que andamos. Nacimos de muchas madres, pero aquí solo hay hermanos. Y ese mar frente a mi casa, te juro que es verdad como el de la perla, aunque yo esté en Panamá. Y sobre el horizonte veo una nube viajera dibujando la cara del gran Maelo Rivera. Celebra esta reunión, compadre. ¿Qué te parece esta combinación de Rubencito y Calle 13?
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Pero eso no resuelve al blanco sospechoso.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
La oscuridad no absuelve al verbo mentiroso.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Si te perdiste, hermano, encuéntrate a ti mismo.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Vente aquí a Panamá y contribuye al turismo.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Mi gracia residente, mi gracia visitante.
La noche me sirve de
Villa
sábana.
21 en Argentina, sigue echando pa'lante.
La noche me sirve de
Bolivia,
sábana.
la letra va para alto a ver si pasa el filtro.
La noche me sirve de sábana.
Cumplida la tarea, se retira el ministro.
Soplando, Daniel Ramírez.
And I think of home, think of a place where there's we all got to have a place where someone lives, a residence. The physical structure within which one lives, such as a house, a dwelling place with the social unit that occupies it, a household, an environment offering security and happiness, a valued place, the native habitat, a place where something is discovered, founded, developed, or promoted, a source, a headquarters, a home base, or relating to a team's place of origin, on or into the point from which something is directed to the center or the heart. I came up in the street around some real wild brothers with more than one name and more than one baby mother. More than one case, been on more than one run. Got more than one enemy and more than one gun. Want now? All of this left to want is more. Why them cats who's less privileged is just more raw. Less space cause the project laced with more floors. Less sleep cause the nights ain't pieces, more war. The cannons roar like thirsty rainy season thunderclaps on the block where your old pop played a number at. To the spot with the red top, queens is huddled at. To the crib where the little kids spend their summer trap with the jungle cats. Lions and tigers, leopards and cheetahs. For gazelles you get chased like a zebra. They blaze Sheba and dominate the weaker on the street. Hungry bellies only love what they eat, and it's hard to compete when they smiling with your heart and they teeth. And the odds is stacked high beyond and beneath. Son, I've been plenty places in my life and time, and regardless what home is, son, home is mine. We all got to have some place that we come from. This place where we come from is called home. So many places I go. We set out on our travels. We do the best we can. We travel this big earth and we roam. Yes, we all got to have some place that we come from. I said the place that we come from is called home. Got to have some place that go. Even though we may love this place that's on the map. I said anywhere you from, this where you at. Some people live out in some people live in Atlanta. Some people got to live Chicago. And some people do live Miami. And all my people that California. And other people got to live London. And everybody got to live in the whole big world. Together just you and me. When I think of home, my remembrance of my beginning. Laundromat helping Mark Duke fold the bed linen. Chillin' front my building with my brother in them. Spending nights in Bushwick with my cousins in them. Wild style and Beach Street, Federal Relief slowly melting in the morning. Grits we used to eat, right? Stick it to your teeth.
Hey everyone, welcome to our third session of Course Correction, Just Transition in the Age of COVID-19 and Uprising. My name is Angela. I use she, they, we pronouns today, and I'll be your MC. I'll describe myself for the purposes of access today. I'm a brown and down, femme presenting Chicana with dark wavy hair past my shoulders. I'm wearing a black shirt and there's beige curtains behind me and some houseplants. And I'm coming to you all from my home in Deep East Ho Chin, Ohlone Lands, also known as Oakland, California. In today's session, we'll focus on how we move from global domination shaped by racial capitalism to a more reflective, responsive relationship to place through bioregional governance. We're gonna take the first few minutes to do some logistical announcements and shout outs. So I'm gonna pass the screen over to Ellen, who will talk about access. Ellen? Yes, how do
I? Hey everybody, my name is Ellen. Use she or they pronouns. I'm a part of the Movement Generation staff, and I'm a femme presenting Asian woman with long hair that's draped to one side, a turquoise tank top, sitting in front of a white mantle place, and I have small beaded earrings. I'm going to be covering some basic access tech information. And just want to first just name that you might have heard us say this in past sessions, but it's important for us to acknowledge that access, disability justice, language justice is we see as central and crucial to the liberation of people and planet. And there is no ecological justice without disability justice, and that we see our disabled family as an important front line of this fight for liberation. And if we're not doing our best to include them past logistics, right, this is about a collective responsibility, then we're not going to be a fully inclusive movement. And so we are doing our best. It's definitely a learning edge. And so we know we're not going to be perfect, and we always welcome feedback, including in the survey that's going to be sent out to you after the session. So I'm going to share my screen with a few slides and just go over some of the access pieces as quickly as I can. All right. So first, starting with the Spanish interpretation, I want to shout out to Florencia Manovil and Andreina Maldonado, who will be interpreting today, and wanted to invite one of them to come and announce the Spanish line.
Hi, everyone. This is Florencia. Thank you for joining us today. We just wanted to remind you that everything that's being said in English is being translated into Spanish today. So a few guidelines to support interpretation. One, please always say your name before speaking. Two, speak more slowly than usual. Take breaths as you speak. People get nervous, but and speak very quickly, but that makes it difficult to translate. So please speak slowly. Speak directly into the mic. Don't use acronyms. Say complete words. And lastly, wait a moment after someone speaks to say something. That allows us to do language switch if we need to. And I'm just going to say in Spanish, si alguien está escuchando en español y necesita la traducción, por favor, llamen a la línea de español que es 844-855-4444. Y esta información también está en el chat. Y el código de acceso es 1696957. Gracias. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Next, I'm going to cover ASL. So thank you to Juan Ramirez, who you should see on screen, and Deb Taylor, who are going to be our interpreters, ASL interpreters today. We're going to make sure that they stay on screen at all times. And also during screen share, when you're in full screen mode, you could also drag the corner of their window to make them bigger, and you can also move their window around if needed. That's if you're watching through Zoom. We are also going to we also have live captioning provided. So Jeanette Christian from 2020 Captioning is our captioner again today. Thank you for your work. If you're watching in Zoom, there's that closed caption icon at the bottom. You can turn it on there, and then you can also change the size of the text as you need to by clicking on subtitle settings and then moving to the slider to choose your size. If you're watching in Facebook Live, you can also turn captions on and off in the controls in the video window. And then last but not least, wanted to shout out our graphic note taker, Yuki, who is going to be note taking during the session. She's a talented artist and also a staff member of the Climate Justice Alliance. And so we're going to try to show her work every once in a while, and we'll definitely share the final project piece after the session. So that is it. Thank you so much. Passing it back to Angela.
All right. Thanks, Ellen. Thanks, everyone. I also want to give a big shout out to the rest of the Movement Generation crew holding it down behind the scenes on tech support, on chat, answering your questions here on Zoom. We have Abbas, Crosby, Desiree, Ellen, Quentin, and Trey, and then Michelle's holding it down over on Facebook Live. Y'all, it takes a village to raise a course series, okay? Don't let anyone tell you different. If y'all can come on screen real quick for a second so the homies can show you some love, that would be amazing. Hey, everyone. Hold on, I got my, yeah. Everybody wave, all right. Cool, there you are. What's up, Mateo? All right, y'all, thank you so much. That's our team, y'all. All right, well, let's get into it. It took 500 plus years of increasing domination of the land to bring on the pandemics of this moment. We're experiencing the legacy of ecological erosion, entangled with social erosion, and triggered by the illogics of racial capitalism that breaks relations through white supremacy, anti-Blackness, heteronormativity, anti-indigeneity, anti-spirit, and anti-care. So much has happened since we first dreamed up these sessions, y'all. As we shift to think through these multiple crises we faced and that continue to emerge since March. In this tangle of social injustice pandemics that a viral pandemic is both part of and making us confront, we are seeing an implosion of the death-dependent economic order. We are at a moment where the imperative is to accept that the transition is absolutely happening, and we are experiencing it and witnessing that it won't be smooth or without conflict. So here we are, session 3. As we introduced in session 1, the decisions made by global finance that caused the virus to emerge were made far from the places of impact. In session 2, we talked about how financial resources are wielded as power and proposed some ideas for moving towards building community wealth through reparations and collective determination. In this session, we'll get us thinking of how governance and decision-making are at the root of the ecological crises that were already impacting us before this revolutionary moment, from speculative housing markets to global industrial food systems. We'll learn about indigenous territories and the relation to bioregional governance, and we'll talk about how we can move towards local, loving, linked, participatory, and life-affirming economies, plural, through real-time examples from our partner organizations. So I'm going to share my screen real quick so I could show you some points that we'll be engaging y'all with in this session. This is not like my best talent, y'all. Sharing the screen. Okay, there it is. Okay, here we go. All right. So some things that we're hoping that y'all leave with today. First, we'll share a definition of bioregion as a land and water territory defined by the geographical limits of human communities and ecological systems, not by political boundaries. We'll talk about how bioregions reflect a scale of relationship, social organization, and governance that has occurred organically for millennia, and that we must consider re-engaging if we are to shift to a regenerative way of life, both ecologically and socially. And then we'll share a little bit about being organized bioregionally and how that creates the opportunity for ecological justice, restorative care, and participatory self-governance. And we'll also talk about how eco-literacy is needed on all scales, from the scale of the self to the scale of the bioregion, as we collectively strategize towards bioregional governance. And then, there they are again. And then here's our flow for this session. So after this, we'll have a grounding by Karina. And then Mateo will talk about the COVID moment, and followed by Karina talking about indigenous territories. Carla will come on and help us understand bioregions. We'll have a bio break and a cultural offering performance. And after that, we'll finish up with some examples of bioregional governance, concluding thoughts, and a short question and answer. Okay, so now I have the honor to introduce Karina Gould, who will ground us in this virtual space today. Karina is the co-founder of the Sogorea Te' Land Trust, the first urban indigenous women-led land trust in the country. She is also the traditional spokesperson for the Confederated Villages of Lijan, Ohlone. She resides in the traditional territory that her ancestors have lived in since the beginning of time. So welcome, Karina. Thanks again for being here with us today.
Otashe Tuhi, Ka'at Lashanka, Ka'at Ra'at Karina. I said, good day, relatives. My name is Karina Gould, and I am so honored to be here today with all of you in this virtual world. New thing is I'm trying to explain who I am, and I laughed about this with my assistant. I said, oh, I'm short and round and brown, and so let's start off there. My hair is pulled back. I'm wearing abalone earrings, and I'm sitting in my kitchen right now, coming to you from my traditional territory of Lishan, also in the territory of Huichin on the border of Irgin. And we'll talk about those different places later on in my talk. I think that it's important that when we come together in this way, that we are able to take a breath. One of the things that's been happening over the last 110 plus days is that we've all been on sit time by Mother Earth. And I think that's one of the beautiful things that Movement Generations has been talking about in the last few series of these talks. How it is that we sit down and we really ground ourselves in the places that we're at. And so today I'm going to ask you all to take a deep breath, because what I want to talk about is I want to talk about hope. And hope is a way for us to free ourselves from some of the fears that we may be having around the changes that are happening around the world and through this disease that we now know as COVID-19. And to bring hope into your heart and think about the next 7 generations and what hope that you would like to see for them. And so as we take in a deep breath together and then let it go out completely, let fall away all of the tension from this morning, maybe the news that we read, some of the violence that we've seen. We want to take a deep breath and wash that away again. So we'll take a deep breath in. And then we'll release it again. As we take in a deep breath again, what we're going to ask is we're going to ask our Mother, the Earth, to take care of us as she has done for thousands of years since the time has begun. We're going to ask her to continue to do that and to hold us as human beings, as part of the circle of life, to continue to hold us and to ground us in this place that we call Earth. So if we could take a deep breath together, and then we'll let it go. Today, it's a beautiful day here in our territory. The sky is blue, and I can see a redwood tree outside of my window. I'm hoping that you guys can see something that is alive next to you, whether it's a house plant or it's a picture of a view of the mountains or the ocean, or you can see outside your window and see something growing. I want you to take a look at what you can see and to acknowledge that it's a live being, and it has a power as well. It is breathing air and giving air. It is living being, whether it's water or it's land or if it's plant, to acknowledge that it is alive and to take in a deep breath and thank it for its life force, and for giving you the pleasure of seeing or hearing or being in its presence. So take a deep breath and let it go. I want to thank all of our ancestors from all four directions, and ask them to come into this space with us today. I want to ask them to bring their knowledge and their courage and their wisdom. And we're going to ask them to continue to hold us up and to give us courage during this time that things are changing, this time that is unsettling, this time that we are looking for answers. And we're going to ask our ancestors from the East, the West, the North, and the South to come together and hold us up and help us to open up our hearts and our minds to a better and different way of being in this world. And so we'll take a deep breath with that as well. We're going to call on creation to help us out right now and help us to ground us and to listen to the lessons that we are learning from this disease that has hit the world. From COVID, we know that as we've been sitting in place, the world in a very short time, she has begun to heal herself, to remind us of our place in the sacred circle of life that human beings have taken themselves out of. Let us be reminded that we are relations to all those that fly in the sky, all those that live in the water, all those that pollinate our foods and medicines, that we are relations to the winds and the waters, and that we ourselves come from the earth. And so let's remember those things and take in a deep breath and let it go. Let us come into this space today and ask our ancestors and whoever we pray to for healing for the earth, for those that are sick, for those that are suffering with diseases, not just COVID, for those that are behind the walls of imprisonment, behind the walls of false borders, behind the walls, imprisoned by their own mental health, or behind the walls of incarceration. We ask for special blessings for those that are having difficult times, for those that are crossing over to the next world. We ask for blessings for them to be met by their ancestors with song and laughter and language. And those that are left here on the earth have a lighter heart, knowing that they are in a better place. We ask grandmothers and grandfathers, our ancestors and Creator, to take care of our elders and our little babies. We ask for special blessings for the waters so that they may be here fresh and clean for the next 7 generations and beyond. That we have fresh air for the next 7 generations and beyond. Good land to grow food on for our medicines and our food, so it brings us nutrition and there's an abundance, and that we take care of one another as we've always meant to be. Thank you so much for this time, and I will be back shortly.
Thank you so much, Karina. We want to invite us all to take a brief 30-second pause to let Karina's words integrate. Take some breaths at your own depth and pace. Also, it's a good moment to get or have someone bring your snacks, water, a blanket, or a fan, depending on where you're joining us from. All right, y'all. So we're ready to get into this super exciting content on Indigenous territory, bioregionalism, and bioregional governance. I have the tremendous honor of introducing our facilitators who are about to take y'all on a journey. One of them is Karina, who you just met, and we also have Movement Generation Collective members, Mateo Nube and Carla Perez. Mateo is one of the co-founders of Movement Generation Justice and Ecology Project. He was born and grew up in La Paz, Bolivia. Since moving to the San Francisco Bay Area, he has worked in the labor, environmental justice, and international solidarity movements. Mateo is the son of Barbara and fortunate father of Maya and Nilo. He is also a member of the Latin rock band Los Nadies. Finally, Mateo is national co-chair of the Climate Justice Alliance's steering committee. Carla is a dedicated mother and community organizer of Native, Mesoamerican, and Spanish heritage, residing in Oakland, California. Prior to joining Movement Generation in 2007 as a planning committee member and co-founder of the Justice and Ecology Project, Carla spent 10 years as an environmental justice organizer in Richmond and East Oakland. She's also the founder of the Healing Clinic Collective, a spiritual organizing project that offers free, traditional, non-industrial healing to traumatized populations in the Bay Area. Carla's hard work is done in dedication to her ancestors, her daughters, and to the spirit of creation. So we're gonna start with Mateo. Mateo, you wanna join us on screen? And then take it away.
Hermosa familia, what an honor, what a treat to be here with you all. Angela, Corina, thank you for what you've already shared. Carla, always a pleasure to be with you. Once again, my name is Mateo. I use he, him pronouns. I am male identified. I'm a white Latino. I am sitting in a living room with a terracotta wall with some pictures of nature behind me, and I'm proudly wearing my Oakland roots hat, my Occupy the Farm bandana / face mask, and my Las Cafeteras t-shirt, if you can see it here, all black and red. Felt like appropriate colors for today. So what I'm gonna share with you all is some context that relates our theme for today, bioregional governance, with COVID. And you know, Angela already got us headed in that direction. I'm going to share my screen. And here we go. I did just realize I didn't mention that I'm greeting you all from Richmond Territory, also known as Berkeley, California. So yes, we're talking about bioregional governance, and we're making a case for its coherence in relation to, you know, what we talk about at Movement Generation often, and it's one of the bread and butter themes for us, is what it takes to return to right relationship to place, and the importance of defending the many peoples around the world who are already living in right relationship to place. Before I start though, an hour before our webinar was about to start, we got news that a mentor to many of us here at Movement Generation passed, Lorna Hill, who was the director of the Ujima Theater Company in Buffalo, in New York. So I wanna evoke her incredibly beautiful spirit. Thank you, Lorna, for all you have taught us. And sending my condolences to all who are close to Lorna as we hold her passing. Rest in power, dearest comrade. So I take a deep breath and I return us to, we had some key takeaways from both session 1 and 2 that we wanted to. In session 1, all economies being rooted in ecosystems is the one that I really want to highlight. We had multiple points. And you know, we learned also about how global finance capital really has been the key driver of this pandemic we're in. And then in session 2, one of the key takeaways was a reminder from the Black liberation movement of the fact that resources that were captured from our stolen lands and stolen labor to build this extractive economy need to be reclaimed. And militarism and police funding is one of the first places where that needs to happen, is happening. So returning to one of the points from session 1, all economies being nested within ecosystems. The point here is all economic activity has ecological consequences, for better or worse. The economy wherein mediates our relationships to ecosystems. And as we were saying, it's the financial hotspots where the big banks live that have really driven this disease emergence. And this is part of a bigger dynamic. These banks and financial entities are the beating heart of the extractive economy. They have led the global mismanagement of home. And at the root, what this has meant is they have robbed place-based peoples of the capacity to be accountable to each other and to the land that we live on. So again, reclaiming that capacity to govern and be accountable is one of our key political tasks. I raise this in relationship to the COVID moment because this global system, this global mismanagement of home is held up by global supply chains. And if nothing else, the COVID moment has made it very clear to pretty much everyone that this system is extremely brittle. Anecdotally for us, as consumers, we've experienced it through our relationship, say, to toilet paper or masks, but it's a structural question that has really put the survival of many at stake. And I just want to highlight 2 examples that are more structural in nature. That in March, what we started learning from many municipal water systems across this continent was, the economy started contracting, the oil industry started shutting down, and we learned that one of the byproducts of this industry is what's called food grade carbon dioxide, and that municipal water systems, for example, in the state of Washington, depend on this food grade carbon dioxide to purify water. So suddenly, folks who run these systems were like, whoa, we're not sure if we can actually purify water for the folks who depend on it. We're talking millions of residents, right? And similarly, we also learned, or I learned, that one company in Malaysia that runs 3 factories produces one out of every 5 condoms in the world. And there was an outbreak in those 3 factories and they shut down. And suddenly we were facing a public health crisis on a different front, just because of this concentration of production in one location. So I named these 2 examples to point to the fact that, again, these long chain supply chains expose us all to all these unnecessary risks. And they're an invitation to all residents of this planet to really see how this extractive economy does not serve us well. So again, to the point of today's conversation, if we are to reclaim proper management of home, and this is built off of what in session 2 we learned are often referred to as regenerative economies, and Angela pointed to the importance of pluralizing that, then again, today is about discussing what does this, how does collective self-determination happen, at what scale? And we want to make the case that bioregional is the scale to really focus on. And our family at the Occidental Arts and Ecology Center offers this term basins of relations that Carla will unpack. That is a good place for me to pause, because it's all about relationships. It's all about healthy regenerative relationships. So this is where I pause. I will stop sharing my screen, and I believe I return the mic to Corina. Gracias, familia.
Thank you so much. That was a great recap of the work that has been happening. I wanted to, I think I'm supposed to share my screen. I was not sure. I was sent a message to someone. So we're talking about bioregions, and indigenous people were, what that really looks like is territories. And so if you all are on my Facebook page or on my Instagram page, I put up last night a painting that said Ohlone Territory that was recently painted in the city of Berkeley, which is in the territory of Huichin. And so I'm gonna try to share my screen because I was not sure how this was gonna work with the, so give me a few seconds. Maybe not. Okay, I'm going to keep talking while we're doing this. So Bay Area folks know where the city of Oakland is. The city of Oakland sits in the middle of Huichin territory. Huichin is a territory that was broken up, and what we think of as cities today and counties, right? Huichin was 6 Bay Area cities, so not as large as a county, but it had many watersheds that came through it. And so I want to get to this map, I'm hoping to do that. And I was trying to figure out how to do this. Sorry, guys. Here it is. And let's see, it's up. And there it goes. And here we go. Here it is. I figured it out. Yay. All right. So what we're looking at right now is a map of the Bay Area. And I know that some of you guys are from all over the country, maybe all over the world. And so this is not a concept that is really old. It's a concept that is not that long ago. So in California and in the Bay Area, colonization happened only about 250 years ago. And it started with the Spanish coming and bringing the Spanish missions. Prior to that happening, our ancestors lived in right relationship with the lands and the waters. And we were given responsibilities, and that's how we believe. It was our responsibility to take care of a particular piece of land. And it was a relationship that was built over thousands of years through ceremony, through a cosmology, through spirituality, through a belief system that we all shared in common. Now, it's hard to understand because so many people were given wrong information about who our tribes are. And there was actually multiple tribes within these territories. So each of the large words that you see on the map are all a territory, right? And within each of these territory, there were multiple tribes. So there was many small tribes that lived within each of the territories and took care of a particular piece of the land, right? What we held in common was a place called Tuyshtak. And many people in the Bay Area know this place as Mount Diablo, right? Mount Diablo was where our creation story was. So our cosmology lines us up with Mount Diablo from the place where we were created. And from there, we were all given portions of places that we were supposed to take care of in right relation. So what does that mean to become in right relationship with a piece of land? And I think that that's what we're talking about in bioregions. Traditional people lived in particular areas and they took care of that land. So imagine a couple of 100 years ago, an indigenous people always talking story. So I'm going to talk about this in a story kind of way. Imagine a couple of 100 years ago, you were in Irgin, which is the one that starts with an I down here. And you were trying to get to Halkin because you needed to see your auntie about some medicine that she had. But you would not just go to your auntie's house like you do today. You might go from Fremont today to Hayward and not think about anything. Just easy go, right? Well, a couple of 100 years ago, you might stop at this waterway, which would be the edge of that territory. And you would light a fire, a smoke fire, not a big fire. So you would announce that you were there at the edge of this territory. And you would wait there patiently for someone to come and get you. Folks from the village that was closest there would go and send people out to bring you back to the village. While you were going to the village, you might talk and joke around. And then when you got to the village, there would be food waiting for you. And there would be a gathering of people that might have songs to welcome you there. And there would be gifts exchanged back and forth. And there might even be some gambling that happens. All of this happens, it's called protocol, right? All of this happens before you even have the chance to say, why do you need to come? What is your business coming into our land? Because we understood the relationship that we're going to a place where someone else has the relationship with that land. They know the waterways of that land. They know when it floods, when it's time to pick foods, when it's time to gather medicines. They have all of that information. So we come hoping as a good guest that they will take care of us while we're on that land, right? And so we might say that we needed to see our auntie. We hadn't seen her for a long time, and that we would like to come and get medicine for her, for maybe my mom back home. And we send a big greeting from the people from the other village, and we would talk about things. And then before I left home, there would be lots of gifts to take back with us. And of course, I brought gifts with me to share. So the problem is that when I talk to little kids, fourth graders, maybe 10-year-olds, I ask them, what does it mean to be a guest in your best friend's house, right? Fourth graders, we as adults have taught fourth graders, our little kids, really good manners, right? So they always have the right answers. They say, oh, well, you ask permission before you touch anything. You say thank you and please. You don't destroy anything that's there. And you don't go through their refrigerator, right? You do all of these things. And then as adults, we forget that we're a guest on someone else's land. No matter where you are in what is now called the United States, you're on unceded, stolen territory of indigenous people. And so these relationships that were built with the land and with the other neighboring tribes had been broken down because of colonization and white supremacy. And in the Bay Area, a very short time ago, 200 years ago, every freshwater creek in the Bay Area, and I believe there was over 50 of them, you could drink fresh water out of. And 200 years ago, there was no concept of homelessness. There was no concept of hunger. There was always enough. There was no concept of prisons or policing in the way that we see it today. Because there was this natural idea of relationships that you understood that in my territory, I would take care of the ceremonies that are supposed to happen to welcome the salmon home, the ceremonies that are supposed to happen when the strawberries were grown and how we shared them, the ceremonies when the earth is going to sleep. All of this is done on a time that is not linear Western time, but the time according to the way the earth is cycled out. And so we as human beings forgot that we are supposed to be on that cycle, not on a cycle of a watch, right? Like we're on today. We have to give you all this information in order to get out. So today what has happened is that we've broken ourselves down into these places where we don't have conversations and there's no responsibility to anybody, and there's no responsibility to the earth, and there's no responsibility because we see ourselves outside of creation. So what I say is when I talk about it, it's like there's this circle of creation that we believe as Indigenous people that we were all brought here on the earth with a particular purpose. All right, everything was created, and as human beings, we were the last ones created. So we're the little brothers and sisters of everything else that was created before us. The earth was here, the waters was here, the plants and the animals were here, all in order to for us to be on this earth in a good way. And our responsibility was to make sure that we took care of the land in such a way that we didn't overuse it, and that we had respect for the animals and the life that we took in order to sustain ourselves. And we lived in that way in reciprocity for thousands and thousands of years, literally, all over the world, until this doctrine of discovery said that Europeans could come and take land from Indigenous people. Because we were only half human. So now we're trying to get back to how do we now sustain ourselves in this time of climate chaos? How do we discern that that we go back to living in a smaller village life, a place where you can imagine that all of your needs are met within walking or biking distance. Imagine that maybe 8 to 12 square miles would be the places of where you would have medical, you would have all of your medical needs met, all of your water needs met, all of your food would be there, all of the things that you would need would be right there, and you could walk to it, you could bike to it. It'd be easy to trade with other people from other places that had extra stuff. And so that's what people would do. It would be a form of economy that was not made of this stuff that's made out of paper and coin or plastic cards, but it would be actually a reciprocity with each other, because as human beings, I see that you need something and you see that I need something. And we're able to exchange that because we see each other and our humanity in order to survive on this earth. And so when we're talking about really territories and ancient ideology from Indigenous people all around the world, of how do you take care of that land in the best kind of way, together in a community, and then you're able to share out extra with other people that live close by, and that community is able to thrive so that you're able to not go by this Western clock, not have to begin to think about paying rent. Can you imagine 200 years ago, nobody paid rent in the Bay Area? That's a while. Yep, 2 minutes or I'm done.
Yeah, 2 minutes. And then
All right.
did you want to stop sharing your screen so we could see you, or you want to keep it up?
I can take it down. I didn't know that you couldn't see me.
Yeah. You and yeah.
Unfortunately, I can see myself still.
Yeah, you got it. 2 minutes.
Great. Thank you. So I'm just going to wrap up pretty quickly and just say that when we're talking about, I wanted to just begin to plant the seed about what would it look like in your hometown in order to make this actually happen. How would we begin to take care of one another in a reciprocal kind of way? How would we then also be responsible not only to each other as human beings, but how do we become responsible to the earth? How do we be responsible to the waterways? If we talk about in 200 years that the waterways in the Bay Area have been dammed and polluted, it's not that long ago. We could actually reverse that process, take it back with the technology that we have today, make it in such a way that salmon would come back up the creeks, could continue to feed the people, to create the biodiversity that was once here in a way that would take care of smaller communities, a way that we put a smaller footprint on the earth as human beings, and working really in right relationship with the earth and everything else that was created before we were brought here. And so I'm just going to close up there, and I'm happy to take questions and answer, or do questions and answers at the end. And thank you for joining us all today.
You're on mute, Carla.
Sorry. Thank you so much, Karina. Thank you so much for that. Good afternoon, everyone. My name again is Carla Maria Perez. I am a Latin American native, or Chicana, with dark brown hair pulled back into a braid that's hanging on my left side. I'm wearing a black shirt with a turquoise necklace and turquoise earrings. I'm sitting in my living room with a sort of a wall mantle behind me. I'm also tuning in from Huichin Ohlone Territory, or Oakland, California. So good afternoon from all the places that you are in today. Thank you so much, Karina, for giving us that lesson in Chocheño, or the Bay Area's past, and helping those of us that live here deepen our relationship to this place. To build off of what Karina shared and take us into bioregional governance, I'm going to offer a few definitions for us. But before I do, I want to ask everyone to expect some unfinished business today. There is so much more to say about the concepts we're going to introduce and the examples we're going to give than there is time in this webinar. So thank you in advance for your understanding on that. And now for the first definition, I'm going to share. I'm also going to share my screen. Okay. Great. So this is a definition just to complement really the beautiful narrative that Karina laid out for us. This is a definition of indigenous territory. Indigenous territory, also referred to as traditional territory, describes the ancestral and contemporary connections of indigenous peoples to a geographic area. Territories may be defined by kinship ties, seasonal travel routes, trade networks, sharing of resources, and cultural, linguistic, and spiritual connections to place. Right? So you can see a lot of the things that Karina mentioned reflected there. The reason we started with the understanding of indigenous territories is because we can really clearly see how the more contemporary definition of a bioregion stems from this original understanding. And because we believe that knowledge of home is the best starting place for any line of inquiry. But before we go any further into actually talking about a bioregion, don't mean to be overly suspenseful, we're going to introduce a quick poll. So Ellen, if you could hook me up with that poll. This is to get a sense of what the knowledge base is on this line. How familiar are you with the concept of a bioregion? And you have three options there: not very, somewhat, and very familiar. So I'm going to go ahead and give everyone a second to click on your poll option. And we'll give that maybe another 15 seconds. Hoping everyone is able to choose their answer. And whenever it's 15 seconds is up, Ellen can go ahead and close the poll and show us our results. Okay, all right. So good, there's a good number of folks that have some familiarity with this concept. Also a good number of people, 30% or so, that are not familiar with it, and a small percent of people that are. Okay, great. So now I'm going to share my screen again, and we're going to look at some definitions of the term bioregion. A bioregion is a land and water territory whose limits are defined by, not by political boundaries, but by the geographical limits of human communities and ecological systems. I'm going to switch between English and Spanish slides here, and we may also post these during the break, so you have longer time to look at them. A bioregional area has to be large enough to maintain the integrity of the region's biological communities, habitats, and ecosystems, to support critical ecological processes like nutrient cycles, waste cycles, migration, and stream flow, meet the habitat requirements of keystone species and indicator species, and to include the human communities involved in the care, honoring, and understanding of biological life sources. And it has to be small enough for people to consider it home. In pre-colonial times, people in a bioregion were related tribal or linguistic groups, which gave the place a unique cultural identity. So a bioregion is also defined by its people, not only markers in the landscape. In a bioregion, local residents have the primary right to determine how use of life sources, work roles, and decision-making happen for their own bioregional community. The livelihoods, claims, and interests of local communities were and should be both the starting point and the criteria for bioregional development and governance. Bioregions are about the boundaries of home defined by people in a place. They can range dramatically in size, as well as have smaller bioregions nested inside larger ones. So with this definition in mind, let your imagination run wild. Can you see a world of linked bioregions where each one local collective determination results in social organization that is regenerative socially and ecologically? What does that look like? For example, facing one's own accumulated waste will inevitably lead to a waste management system that's something like zero waste. When the primary source of food and products come from one's own bioregion, food systems that enhance and synergize with local ecological restoration are supported and ensure ongoing supply of healthy and sustainable food. The local ecological system of checks and balances would keep threatening viruses like COVID-19 from becoming a human global pandemic. And we would aim to heal people whose trauma or personal conditions lead them to cause harm to their bioregional family rather than punish them. Because we know, I want to reference the way Karina talked about, we would see the humanity in things, right? And we know that by punishing people, that ingrains and exacerbates trauma even more. And then we also have to hold that as a community rather than the improvement in everyone's experience when there's healing. And as all ancestral cultures did, trade, communication, and travel would exist among bioregions, holding the livelihoods and interests of bioregional residents as the criteria for how bioregions interact with those around it. And while this term or this concept of bioregionalism may be newer for some of us, a newer way of representing and identifying with place and it's a culture of living within ecological boundaries, the concept is only new for those of us who have been raised in the Western industrial technological age. Again, as we've heard, the essence of bioregionalism has been a common notion, or really just the way of being, for Native people for thousands of years, and still remains so for much of the human population today. So I'm going to take a little breath after all of that, and we're going to move on to our last two definitions. Share my screen again. Okay, so we're going to talk about watersheds and food sheds. Yes, give it up for your watershed. A watershed is an area of land where all the rain and melting snow drains into a single body of water. Watersheds come at all scales, from a puddle to a river to a Great Lake. Also called basins, watershed boundaries are determined by high points in the landscape. And food sheds, you'll see how similar these concepts are. A food shed is the geographic region that produces food for a particular population. It's a region of food flows, from the area where it's produced to the place where it's consumed, including the land it grows on, the route it travels, the markets it passes through, and the mouths that it ends up in. So let's look at a couple of ways that bioregions have been defined around food sheds and watersheds. I'm excited to share these. Here's an image of what it could look like to organize ourselves around traditional food sheds and keystone plant and animal species, as well as the evolved cultural foods that come from people in a place and help define that region. Plants and animals are sometimes regarded as the basis of a bioregion because they are the life sources that become cultural foods, clothing, medicine, art, and through local cosmologies and belief systems and the way rituals, customs, and celebrations use these foods, including the process of preparing them. We can see ourselves, if you're streaming in from Chochenyo Bay Area, you can see we are largely in acorn territory according to this map, acorn food shed with some salmon, some pinon nut, and some chili pepper going on. All right, this next map is a map produced by a group called Salmon Nation, a group of Native and non-Native folks fighting for the recognition of the Salmon Nation bioregion that lines the west coast of North America, from central California to the northmost tip of Alaska, from inland waters of the Arctic to the most remote of the over 2,500 Alaskan islands that extend far into the Pacific Ocean. This Salmon Nation is an area of land and sea covering 50,000 miles of coastline. So from looking at this Salmon Nation bioregion, you can see how bioregions truly are shaped by relationships. There's no conventional cutout for how bioregions are shaped and applied to a place. It's all about the relationships. In pre-colonial days, it would have been impossible or just extremely hard and dangerous for people, say, in Northern California or Oregon, to cross the Sierra Mountain Range to trade with people on the eastern side of the range. But since this is a coastal area, people were able to move easily by boat up and down the coast and make relationships in those places as far down as central Mexico. And so an older depiction of this West Coast bioregion may very well have looked like a sock with a rock in it, just hanging down like a long, slender loop, ranging from Alaska or northern Washington down to the central Mexican coast. So at this point, I want to make an observation that probably most of us have made, which is that we all began in a bioregion. Everyone. Just considering what we heard from Karina, it sparks the curiosity of why bioregions are such a generally unknown concept to the mainstream population, when every human culture on the planet was essentially conceived inside a bioregion. For millennia, bioregional governance was the scale of collaborative stewardship that emerge from the wisdom and the people of the web of life in every place. In a bioregional context, people know their watershed, they know their food shed, they know their plant shed and animal shed, they know their relatives' shed, and they know their pathogen shed. With this hyper-localized knowledge of place, communities are able to protect their place for generations to come, because you cannot protect what you don't understand. I'm going to say that again. It's one of my favorite quotes. You cannot protect what you don't understand. This evolved knowledge of place is a key component of ecological health and restoration, a key component of ecological justice. And when we talk about the unfortunate disruption of the harmonious balance between human communities and the earth or the ecosystems around us, or here in Turtle Island or anywhere, we don't often hear, oh, it's the disruption of bioregional governance, named as one of the factors that led to the collapse of ecological harmony. But perhaps we should. Addressing this could make ecological justice possible in our lifetime. And I don't know about y'all, but I am holding out for that. So if we had it so good in the bioregional life, then why aren't we organized that way anymore? You probably can guess the answer. But from our perspective, the success of the global colonization project very much depended on the separation of land-based peoples from the places they were in relationship to for centuries or more. This relationship is where Indigenous people draw their strength, resilience, connection for life. And also Indigenous spirituality and ritual are based in the land of their immediate territory. Intentionally separating Indigenous people from their ancestral ecosystems made it possible to exploit the forests, rivers, mineral deposits, right? Fodder for the development of the US capitalist economy and imperialism to come. So that's the not good news. But the good news is too that our information is alive and flowing again here with Karina and many other Native relatives that are keeping their culture, language, stories, and wisdom alive for the benefit of our future. So I'm gonna move now. Now that we have a good idea of the concept of bioregions, I'm gonna share my screen again. And I'm excited.
Carlita, you have like 5 minutes, just FYI.
Okay, thank you. I'm excited to share about a bioregion that is really close to MG's heart, and that's the Great Lakes and Lake Erie bioregions. Show some love in the chat if you're from that place. And with all due respect to the First Nations people there, I'd like to offer some basic background on this place that holds 20% of the world's fresh water. The Great Lakes were formed by glaciers 14,000 years ago, geologically a young water system. It's a hotspot of biological and cultural diversity with more than 17 Indigenous tribal groups that have lived in relationship to the Great Lakes. And now let's look at the Lake Erie watershed specifically. Bioregion specifically, but this image does draw the boundary of the Lake Erie bioregion by its watershed. The green area shows all the tributaries that flow into Lake Erie from an elevated point in the landscape. Lake Erie is the shallowest, warmest, and most plentiful of the Great Lakes, holding 116 cubic miles of water. And this, this beautiful ecosystem that was once in dynamic balance was dramatically shifted with colonization and all of the industrial activity that they imposed on the land. But what's more tragic was the attack on the traditional ecological knowledge. Settlers, massacred Indigenous communities, drove them from their lands, forbade them to use their language, traditions, and ceremonies, right? And so there was a lot of loss for a long time of the knowledge of how to be in good relationship to this place, right? I want to make a quick note about maps and show you this map. This is a map produced by a group called Decolonial Atlas, and it was created by people from this region. Important to show this map because it's important to acknowledge how maps have been used as such an instrument and a tool for colonizing other peoples. So we wanted to make sure, and we showed that we showed a map that was made by the people of this place. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that word there, which is the Mohawk word for buffalo, because I'm not familiar with the language enough to pronounce it correctly. But my favorite part about this map is that it has no lines. So again, Lake Erie is the most densely populated of the Great Lakes, with major cities along its shoreline like Detroit, Michigan, Toledo and Cleveland, Ohio, and Buffalo, New York. Just want to shout out that MG has been in deep relationship to people in both of those places for 10 plus years or so. And as you can see, these two metropolitan cities are at each end of Lake Erie, and they have so much in common. In addition to sharing Indigenous history and being historically Black cities, for both cities, water is a central component in industrial and economic activity, as well as in cultural and recreational activity. And water has also been used as a tool of oppression in this whole region and in these two cities. Perhaps most notably, is the infamous and shameful water shutoffs that Detroit still faces, with at some points over 40,000 individuals living without running water, right? And Buffalo, Toledo, other cities all around Lake Erie have had such polluted public water to the point that people are afraid to drink from the tap.
We have a request from interpreters. Could you slow down a little bit?
Sure.
Thank you.
Sorry, that time check probably made me speak more quickly. Thank you. So Detroit and Buffalo are connected by Lake Erie, right? They are sitting on the place where 20% of all the fresh water on the planet is contained. And yet there are people and communities there that don't have access to clean water or any running water in some cases, right? For political and industrial reasons. How is this allowed to happen? What frame of mind of governance, what culture and worldview allows this to take place? Because it shouldn't be. It's wrong. And it's the result of settler colonial mindset, of an extractive economy, and of the mismanagement of home. What if Lake Erie was governed as a watershed-based bioregion? What if the social organization and governance was organized that way and water was available for basic needs and protected by all of the communities that depended on it? Healthy watersheds allow for traditional, native, and land-based livelihoods. They reduce flood risks, support sustainable large-scale food systems, filter pollution, mitigate impacts of climate change, and enhance the physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual well-being of all of its residents, humans or not. As a closing point, both of these places are right now really leading the charge in defining a Green New Deal that speaks to regional governance, right? They are asserting that a Green New Deal is not about federal policy, but about having a chance to determine what regional governance looks like, specifically from a Black liberation lens, and where governance of water as a human right is central in that. Okay, so reminder that from the Just Transition Framework, one of the features of regenerative governance is that primary decision-making happens at the smallest scale appropriate to what we're trying to govern. So different arenas of governance demand different boundaries. Water should be governed at the watershed scale, where all the peoples impacted in a watershed and by the care of the watershed are involved. Where water is the largest and the most influential feature of the landscape there in the Lake Erie and Great Lakes bioregions, it should be governed that way, in a way that reflects how critical it is to that place. Thank you so much. I'm going to pass it back to Angela to take us to break.
Wow, thank you so much, Carla, for breaking it down for all of us. So with that, we're gonna pause for a 3-minute people's break and then come back with a special cultural offering. So do your thing and we'll be back in 3 minutes. Welcome back, folks. Apa, music going still? Just giving a moment for our ASL interpreters to come back on. Great. Welcome back, everyone. It's my absolute pleasure to introduce you to our special guest today, Kiwi Elefante. Kiwi is a Los Angeles raised, Bay Area chiseled hip hop artist, currently living on Chochenyo Ohlone territory, also known as Oakland. He's been recording and performing for over 20 years, mostly known as part of renowned hip hop group Native Guns, and more recently as the lead vocalist and composer for funky hip hop soul band Mass Bass. When he's not rapping, Kiwi is also a graphic designer by trade, as one of the worker owners at Design Action Collective in downtown Oakland. His music reflects the struggles of being a brown working class person in diaspora and the rising up of everyday folks out of oppression and exploitation. Give it up for Kiwi, y'all.
Hello, everybody. My name is Kiwi, he, him pronouns. I am a brown Filipino cis man. I have a beard and dimples. I'm wearing a backwards cap that has flowers on it and a plain black t-shirt. And I've got a lot of tattoos on my arms. I'm honored to be here today. Thank you to MG for the invite. Another thing is that I tried a few different audio configurations and this was the best sound that I could come up with. So I apologize if it doesn't sound entirely great. This is the best I could do. And I'm also gonna point or paste rather the lyrics. If I can, I'm going to paste. Okay, never mind, I'm not gonna paste. I'm just gonna go ahead and start. All right, here we go. This song is called Restless because we're done sitting around being neglected by the system, being victimized by state repression. We're done waiting for change. We're ready to go. We are ready to go. Check. They say that hindsight is 2020, well the year is 2020, and you think we'd have a handle, but instead it's getting messy. Ain't no surprise that these leaders are hella sketchy. Money is power and you know they're getting plenty while we're scraping off of pennies, getting pushed out of the town. Cost of living going up, chance of living going down. What goes around doesn't come around if you're brown. Praying for someone to save us so we stuck beneath the ground. However many leaps and bounds we continue. Our spirit can't be bought, you see it's something that is in you. Tutors looking at it like an item on the menu. But that is not a state of being they can ever get to. Spiritual or mental, this is from the root, not a copy or a stencil. This is our truth, transported in this vessel, reaching another level. The revolution coming soon, put it on the schedule. Go ahead and keep counting us out. We gonna take our freedom when you least expect it. You better keep that same energy, talking shit about my people, cause my people are motivated and restless. What's up, y'all? You ready?
Yep, you ready to roll.
They said you ready?
Yep, you ready to
What's up, y'all? You ready?
Yep, you ready to roll.
I said you ready?
Yep, you ready to
Yo,
roll.
the drama unfolds, a seed that my grandmother planted from out of the cold. Our liberation wrapped in a blanket, a sight to behold. Some hope for this land we inhabit, for oil and gold. Maybe steady attacking the planet, while we steady distracted by our digital phones. And we dumping all our plastic on indigenous bones. They pushing people out of their original home. Cause some greedy ass dictator sits on the throne. Look, only so long that a human can take this. But government, schools, and police all racist. They talk about freedom, but deny us the basics. Food, clothes, shelter, healthcare, education. Now we getting impatient. We're like a popcorn growing out of the pavement. Kicking the doors open, jumping off of the slave ship. The portrait is painted. The long road to glory, and the story is sacred. Yo, go ahead and keep counting us out. We're gonna take our freedom when you least expect it. You better keep that same energy, talking shit about my people, cause my people, we motivated and restless. What's up, y'all? You ready?
Yup, yup, we ready to roll.
I said you ready?
Yup, yup, we ready to
What's up, y'all? You ready?
Yup, yup, we ready to
Hey,
roll.
I said you ready?
Yup, yup, we ready to roll.
All right. Shout out to everybody. Shout out to Jamie. I see you over there. This song is called Make It Through. I wrote this about a month ago in the current COVID crisis, both feeling a sense of hopelessness, but also a sense of deep hope about our communities taking care of one another. Talk about getting cake when we making crumbs, telling me to go to battle with a staple gun, rocking a hazmat suit just to make a run, picking up some Jameson or Jamaica rum. We're living dangerous, po-po, keeping the curfew. Now they got more freedom to hurt you. When you got nothing, what's the reason for virtue? Why would you trust some politician demon to serve you? So we prefer to keep the circle fortified, take it upon ourselves to be organized. Capitalism got the toilet paper overpriced. Big religion people thinking they could hope for Christ. That's why all we got is us as the mantra. Better believe they trying to divide and conquer. A people that's united is a people that's stronger. I promise you the ones on my altar, I got you. We gon' make it through, just like we always do, yeah. We gon' make it through, just like we always do. We gon' make it through, like we always do, like we always do, like we always do, like we always do. Check. Nipsey said, don't wait, hustle and motivate. We got so much at stake, that's why I'm so awake. I can't create something copied off a boilerplate. I'm from the ghetto landscape of the Golden State. When we incorporate the attitude of holding weight. No breaks, going in circles of roller skates. They telling me to have faith, but I don't relate. Something from nothing is the way that we communicate. That's the way that we communicate. Shout out to MG. Shout out to the land protectors. It's my last one. Yeah. Something happening here. Something in the water, something in the air. I think I'm seeing it clear. Something kind of like there it goes right there. There's something happening here. Something in the water, something in the air. Yeah. I think I'm seeing it clear. I think I'm seeing it clear. Check. The clock ticking to the last top. Turning the earth to the last drop. Polar cap disappearing because it's damn hot. Top of that, we gotta worry about the damn cops. Po-po, folks show this planet becoming no more. Future of our grandkids is a closed door. War on the street, rumble in the jungle. Third world tapping water from a puddle, it's a psycho. Cyclones and typhoons, just wait. Pretty soon it'll be snowing in June. Don't assume all is well when they orbit the moon. If the earth is our mother, we destroying the womb. This is more than a tune, huh? This is a smack in the head, a piece of ball to the battle ahead. Instead, the tide rising on the shores of Fiji. Why you at the store buying a bottle of Fiji? Something happening here. Something in the water, something in the air. I think I'm seeing it clear. Something kind of like there it goes right there. Yeah, there's something happening here. Something in the water, something in the air. Yeah. I think I'm seeing it clear. I think I'm seeing it clear. Check. There's a world out there and it's ours for the taking. They don't give a damn if the earth bleeds. Wrap their dollars in a ribbon made of bacon. They don't care what our families need. I could hear the sound of that corporate greed. I could hear my neighbor saying I can't breathe. I can hear the jungle and the rustling leaves knee deep in this mud and I'm rolling my sleeve. Check it. There's a world out there and it's ours for the taking. They don't give a damn if the earth bleeds. Wrap their dollars in a ribbon made of bacon. They don't care what our families need. I could hear the sound of that corporate greed. I could hear my neighbor saying I can't breathe. I can hear the jungle and those rustling leaves knee deep in this mud and I'm rolling my sleeves. Thank y'all very much. Peace. My name is Kiwi. Much love to NG. Power to the people, y'all. Peace.
Familia, please give it up for Kiwi. Wow, that was incredible. And lots of love out there for Juan too, joining in the show. Mass bass, bringing down the house in the parish with Las Capetes. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Great, this is Mateo back. I know many folks have been chatting in. So how do we do this in real time? How do we assert bioregional governance? And it's an essential question. So we're gonna continue the conversation by giving an example, a very inspiring example of how that is happening in the here and now. I'm gonna share my screen with you all and continue forth. Give me 1 second here. Great. So at MG, we've had the incredible gift and honor to also learn from and visit with some beautiful freedom fighters in the beautiful country of Puerto Rico. And you see here 2 maps and some imagery. So I'm going to tell you a story that has been taking place for roughly 30 plus years. And you'll see a red dot on the map on the top right corner of my screen. And that is the city, the small city of Adjuntas, Puerto Rico. And on the bottom left, you'll see a topographical map of Puerto Rico. And what you'll notice is that Adjuntas is in what is the blue area, subtropical wet forest region of this island. An interesting side note, an invitation to you all, I think it's obvious that bioregions don't really map well with nation states. They're generally smaller. Puerto Rico is an exception. So I think that's a worthy strategic question for study groups in particular to bite into after this webinar. But the point of these 2 maps is to show that Adjuntas sits at the kind of higher elevation of the island of Puerto Rico. Puerto Rico being 3 islands, so Vieques and Culebra aren't in mention right now. So it's the top of the watershed of the island in many ways. And in the 80s, multiple multinational corporations, mining corporations wanted to start open pit mines around Adjuntas. And the people of Adjuntas said, you're not doing that to our beautiful territory. But they made it clear that this wasn't just a struggle about the immediate area where they live. And I'm going to show you some of the folks who led this struggle. But it was actually, let me talk back to the map. They pointed out that it was equally important, say, to the people of San Juan, the biggest city in Puerto Rico, because the water that comes from these subtropical wet forests pours down through watersheds all the way to San Juan. So they were saying, hey, the struggle here is about our shared watershed. This struggle is important. And they successfully fought back these mines. But they did not stop there. And we have an image here of Tinti Della Diaz on the left. She's one of the founders of Casa Pueblo, who's at the heart of the struggle. And this is her son, Arturo. And their slogan on the screen in English would be defending the waters, the forests, and our people. So it kind of captures what governance writ large means for their bioregion. And when they fought back these mines, they not only stopped the mine, but they proposed and won a new forest unit to be managed by the people, not controlled by either corporations or by a colonial state that most folks there resist. They created what they called El Bosque del Pueblo, a self-governed by the people forest. And I'm talking not a small forest, I'm talking about a landmass of 35,000 acres. And in defending the waterway, in defending their capacity to have clean water, they also popularized the importance of protecting the whole ecosystem and created, amongst other things, a forest school. You'll see an image here. When we visited, we met Melvin. He's one of the young educators who pre-COVID would receive hundreds and hundreds of young students from around the region on the weekly to teach them about the importance of this kind of top of the watershed in this region. So this is a beautiful story of folks, again, asserting governance, asserting the relationship of this area to other areas. And they did not stop there. The folks at Casa Pueblo led new campaigns, if you will, some decades ago around saying, hey, it's not just about water. It's actually about asserting governance in multiple of our sheds, including our energy shed. So this is an aerial view of the cultural center that is Casa Pueblo, and you'll see all of these solar panels. And they started creating a community-led and community-controlled power grid. And pre-Hurricane Maria, they were seen, by some as an anomaly. And yet when the hurricane hit, suddenly the 45 solar panels and 12 solar batteries that were providing energy for the cultural center became a tremendous life source for the whole city. People came from all over Adjuntas to store refrigerated medicine, to plug in their respiratory equipment, to charge their cell phones. Casa Pueblo helped restaurants who became social kitchens solarize so they could feed folks, and really took a we versus me approach to, to responding to a disaster. It was a form of disaster collectivism that really took hold. And they did a bunch of stuff that we actually will share a report with you after this webinar. Our sister organization, Grassroots International, put it out along with Movement Generation. So big shout out to Grassroots International. It has a lot of the information of what was so critical about their intervention during and after Hurricane Maria. So post-hurricane, Casa Pueblo then went out and built out this community-controlled energy grid way more. They outfitted an additional 55 homes immediately. As I mentioned, there were these restaurants that were social kitchens, and Casa Pueblo correctly said they will be social kitchens again when further crises hit. They outfitted hardware stores, an agricultural center, a nursing home, the fire station, 5 mini markets, the ones that allowed folks to barter and take stuff without having to provide credit cards when the hurricane hit, and basically presented a model of what it looks like to assert energy independence at the local level. And now they are engaged in a campaign to move Puerto Rico to being 50% energy independent by 2027. And I'm gonna end this story by sharing the words of Arturo, because for them, the point isn't solar. It's about who produces, distributes, and controls energy. The point, again, here is governance. And Arturo says, energy is the capacity to do work. We don't enjoy the wealth made from our work. So one way to decolonize Puerto Rico is in practical terms, create energy independence. We can be producers, not consumers. We don't need coal and gas. We have sun and wind. In 2010, we were defending ourselves from a pipeline. This is Mateo speaking. They won that struggle. So back to Arturo. Now we are on the offensive. Now we are the threat. We're calling for an energy insurrection. We're not going to wait for the government. We're going to unplug ourselves. And at this point, folks from around the world are looking at the Adjuntas model and trying to emulate it. So again, to the question of how does bioregional governance assert itself in real time, we look to folks like Tintin and Arturo who are leading the way. So I wrap up my section. I'm gonna bring forth one more image, or two rather, and I ask Ellen if you don't mind throwing up a poll. I know a lot of folks who are calling in aren't from the Bay Area, but many are. So I have 12 pictures here of native plants to the San Francisco Bay Area. And you'll see there are 4 options here for folks who've been to the Bay, live in the Bay, are familiar with the Bay. If you don't mind just marking how many of these plants you recognize. I'll leave this up for about 15 seconds. Educated guesses work just fine. So there's 12 images. You may know none, you may know 3, you may know 7, you may know all. And in about 5 seconds, Ellen, if you're willing just to give us the tabulation of where we landed in terms of literacy of plants here in the Bay. So we can see half of respondents knew 2 or less. And then we had a plurality, 30% who knew 3 to 5, and then very few who knew more than half. Great, thank you. We can close this one. And I'll show one more slide. Next slide. It's not even logos. It's just a letter of a logo. It's the alphabet, 26 letters. And here's the second poll. I think y'all are getting where this is going. In looking at these 26 letters, throw up a number that you're looking at, like, oh yeah, I know 6 of these logos. I know 26 of these logos. We'll leave this open for 10, 15 minutes. Not minutes, sorry. 10 or 15 seconds rather. Maybe in 5 seconds, Ellen, if you can show us the results. And again, you're gonna get these slides. So if you, okay, so a little different. Whereas we had 50% of folks who knew almost none of the plants, we only have 9% who know 5 or less. And then we have more than half who can recognize 13 or more. We have 30% who recognize almost all. Cool, we can close this poll. The point here, I think is obvious to all, that the extractive economy encourages relationship to consumption instead of relationship to place. So reclaiming our knowledge of place is central to being able to return to right relationship with place and home. So my last slide, you might have seen, and when I first started talking about Puerto Rico, there was an image of the coquí. And there's a common saying in Puerto Rico, it says, soy de aquí como el coquí. I am from here like the coquí. The coquí is a very common frog across the nation state because you can hear it singing at night. And it's also a keystone species. And I want to end here because that common saying is ecological knowledge. It's the culture of place recognizing this critter is central to the health of our ecosystem. Coquís are, amongst other things, incredible nighttime predators. They eat all sorts of insects in voracious ways. And this is central to the ecosystem because then when they excrete, that actually enriches the biomass of pretty much the whole island, which keeps it thriving. So it's, again, all about life and relationships and cycles. So I just wanted to end on that because for those of you who are from Puerto Rico or are familiar with Puerto Rico, we hear this and it might just sound like a saying, but it's actually ecological knowledge at play. And it's an invitation for what we all can and hopefully will return to in terms of dancing with our homes in an elegant, knowledged way. Gracias. I believe I return it to Angela if I'm not mistaken, and I'll stop my share. Gracias, familia. Such an honor to be with you all.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Mateo, for sharing that story. All right, folks, we want to hear from you in the chat. I know it's been going, but we want to ask you a specific question. If you can share in 10 words or less, if possible, what do you need to incorporate bioregional governance in your region? Like, what would help you feel more prepared for this shift? So I'm going to give y'all some seconds to do that. And then we're going to save the chat so you all can see each other's responses later. So no pressure right now. Just think about that. What would help you feel more prepared for this shift? So while you're doing that, I'm going to start with another question that I'm not really going to answer, but that comes up. We'll share a question that comes up over and over again as we vision, and that's, are we really ready? Are we in enough of a crisis to propel us in this way towards building bioregional governance? Because we know bioregional governance can seem like a real stretch, but remember, for original peoples, this is not a stretch. Just think back to the story that Karina was telling us. As Mateo showed us in that last poll, across generations, we've been indoctrinated to know and recognize corporate logos, and for the most part, functionally unknow and unrelate to the living world around us. Many of us have been disciplined to believe that we are separate from the land, separate from others, and separate from the living world. And this way of thinking drives the extractive economy. And even if we know this, we recognize there's still a psychological barrier that might keep us from living into a different type of governance. Since this session has been dedicated to discussing bioregional governance, what is the smallest scale of governance that we interact with daily? One of the smallest scale of governances that we interact with daily. Ourselves, right? Our body, mind, spirit as a whole. So we compassionately acknowledge that we all have different relationships with our bodies, and still it's our first home and our first place. Movements for queer and trans liberation, reproductive freedom, and disability justice, all primarily led by Black and brown women of color, femmes, and non-binary people, have laid the foundation and frontline praxis, or the interplay between theory and practice, of resisting and reclaiming our full selves against racist, ableist, white supremacist heteropatriarchy. As Carla shared earlier, knowledge of home is the best starting place for any line of inquiry. So how well do we know our first home, our ecosystem? And what does knowing our first home have to do with any psychological barriers that might keep us from propelling towards bioregional governance? What are the roots of our psychological barriers? And you know we like to get to the entangled roots of all things here. And since we're talking about territory, land, bioregions, we'll take a few minutes to talk about one colonial tool that disrupted our knowledge of home: mapping. Colonial mapping is used on our lands, and we're really familiar with it, right? To give shape to the physical world by instituting arbitrary boundaries that allowed for the damming of rivers, that disconnected many people from our languages, that discouraged or prohibited sharing and trading, essentially determining how and with whom we could build relationships. Mapping made European colonizers think they could control what they feared, and what they feared and did not know was our lands and our people. Mapping deliberately disrupted our knowledge of home, or ecology, our management of home, economies, by disconnecting our relationships to home, our ecosystems. This has, for the most part, endured through continued indoctrination of this globalized logic of control for the purposes of stealing and building wealth over the course of over 5 centuries, 500 plus years. This imposed cultural shift of disconnection had to happen at the scale of the human mind. So this means we were also mapped. Mapping imposes names, identities. It creates this hierarchical, imaginary world that is necessary to maintain white supremacy, heterosexism, ableism, gender binarism, all of which uphold the global extractive economy through racial capitalism. This way of thinking made it so that colonizers and settlers saw the land that we belong to as real estate and our bodies as a resource for labor. So if our body, mind, spirit is an ecosystem, then the colonial mapping of our body, mind, spirit has dammed up the waters in our bodies, right? Crying is seen as a weakness. That's what we're taught, right? That menstrual blood is hidden and it's a source of shame. It's disconnected us from our understanding of our own fire management, how we take care of our fire as our spirit to regulate our growth. It's controlled our wind, our ways of expression, our emotions, and place those within a hierarchy, right? Joy and happiness are acceptable emotions, while sadness, grief, and anger are not. And then our flesh, made of carbon, our earth. We've been taught that some bodies are good and some are bad. Some are deserving of life and some are not. There are parts of our bodies, of our own bodies, that are seen as bad or shameful. For some of us, it's our whole body. And we've also been made to believe that other people carry expertise about our bodies instead of collaborating with us on our unique knowledge of home. As movements, we've intentionally, righteously, and purposefully trained to keep our focus and energy at the macro scale of governance. And we've also been left with less time to plan and practice for what we will do at the micro scale, inside our home, inside ourself, when we do win. Our movement ancestors and elders in reflection have told us that we also need to transform our intra, within us, and interpersonal relationships. So just imagine what kind of ancestral knowledge and generational healing will activate as we remember our self-ecology together for the purposes of collective governance through care. As we get back into right relationship with the living world we are a part of, through building our ecological literacy, through knowing our body, mind, spirits deeply with trust, and simultaneously cultivating that knowing within our bioregional relationships, within the collective. This also grows regenerative economies. It rebuilds community wealth based on sharing and caring, and moves us even closer to rematriation or restoring the sacred, and reparations, repairing relations. It has to be part of our strategy. So who's feeling me? I'm imagining that you're all communicating some affirmations right now. So I'm going to take a brief pause, and we'll welcome back our facilitators. If you can join us on screen, Karina, Carla, and Mateo, so we could take a few questions from our participants. You all here? Sorry, I can't see you all. Yeah, okay.
Yes.
Yes.
Welcome back. Hey, how's it going? All right, so y'all ready? Here's some questions. Okay, our first question. Can collective ownership / management of land work without a shared sense of reverence? That's the first part of the question, okay? The second, how do we cultivate this shared sense of reverence?
Tag your it. Who's going?
I'm looking at my co-presenters there, like looking at me. That's a really good question. I'm grateful to whoever put that forward, because it's a question that underlies a lot of what we're talking about here in terms of how we move forward. You know, there's something that's similar to reverence can exist in people, even if it's not sort of a spiritual root. Or like myself, when I think of reverence and understand reverence, it definitely has a spiritual quality. I revere the water for multiple reasons. Part of it is because I do believe the water is alive. It has a spirit, and therefore it is my ancestor. And it made it possible for me to be alive. And then there's the more material side of it, which is like, I actually can't live without you. If I don't have water, I will die. And if, you know, so there's, you know, holding our non-spiritualist relatives, community members, comrades. I don't think that spirituality is a criteria for being respectful and recognizing and having humility, right? Like what I learned is that the definition of humility, as I learned from my elders and teachers, is that humility is knowing your place and knowing your role in the circle. So not just a circle of people, but I'm going to refer now to the circle of life, the way that Karina called it. And if we know our place and we know the place of other elements in that circle, you know what the role of water is. You know that you need it to live, and you don't have to have a spiritual belief about it to reckon with that reality. However, we are talking about how examples create conditioned thinking. I mean, I'm a little floating from Angela's share right now. So, you know, I think that there's multiple ways to incite people to appreciate and protect our most valuable resources. I was going to say, sorry, I lost my thought. Sorry. What I was going to say is that we do need to start practicing and modeling the respect on a systemic, institutional, community-based, right? To the effect that what we feed grows, repetition creates a conditioned tendency. So we've been shown the wrong example, and we talk about it a lot too, right? So we got to focus on the right examples, talk about those, practice them, share them out, and it'll be a shift that begins to move. Thanks.
Thanks, Carla. I think that I want to just add to that we might want to think about something wild that other people are doing across the world. Specifically want to look towards Aotearoa, which is New Zealand, and our Maori brothers and sisters that are creating personhood for waters and for mountains and for landscapes, and that to imagine that a river or Lake Erie has the same rights as a human being, the same rights to not be polluted or to be taken advantage or to be used unjustly as is the same as a human being. And that way we have the reverence without, if you want to say not the spirituality. I mean, I think that we are spiritual beings, and we have gotten away from our relationship to the land and everything else. And that's why we're in the place and the predicament that we are in. Human beings have this idea of entitlement right now, and in individualism, specifically in what we call the United States. And we were set up because of Western colonization to look at living in these ideas of nuclear families rather than in community. And so really when colonization happened anywhere in the world, the first thing that they attacked was the sacred places and the sacred people. And then they attacked the women. And then they stole the land. And so in that order, if you were erased from your sacredness, you're erased from your human being anymore. Those sacred things were taken away. The rape of women, your sacred entity was harmed. And then the land that you come from was taken away. That's a lot of damage that has happened. So for us to get out of the mindset of being an individual, that we have somebody that's more than just us to be accountable to. And I think that when you look back at tribal people, that there was an accountability process. You're accountable to your family, you're accountable to your clan, you're accountable to your tribe. And so there's all of these checks and balances that have to happen in order. So there was multiple ways that you were kept in account about your behavior. And so I think that there can be a shared way of doing this. If corporations can have personhood, then why not have water and mountains and landscapes have personhood? If that's the way that we have to think about it in these time and space, then I think that that's how we can get around that question.
Thank you. Thank you so much. So I think we have time for one more question, and it's a big one. How does the concept of bioregions work for urban settings? How can we build a bioregional community in a heavily urbanized environment?
I'm happy to get us started, acknowledging that it's a big question. And I think the invitation, part of this whole session is an invitation for all of us to really strengthen the muscles continually on a weekly basis towards answering that question. Thankfully, I think there are many examples that are alive in multiple, in so many places that get us in that direction. I think of housing land trusts. I think of community land trusts. I think of governance structures that are rooted in place in urban contexts where folks are learning what deep democracy looks like, to live in place and negotiate with one another what it means to care for each other, particularly when differences arise. And it's around building, again, institutions that some are at the block level, some are at the municipal level, some are way beyond that, assert our capacity to do this. So I think I first just wanted to visibilize that there are many ways that people are already practicing these forms of governance in an urban context that get to this question of governance at scale. Those exist and we're doing it all the time. And secondly, that there are social movements. I'm thinking of the landless workers movement in Brazil. We're talking about millions of people networked, federated across every state of Brazil that have reclaimed land and are building their own schools, their own agriculture, their own homes, and practicing this level of governance, again, at the family level, at the block level, at the municipal level, all the way to having congressos at a national level that model this. So, that's my short form of starting to say that there are many examples at multiple levels that we can really learn from and build off of. I'll pause there because I'm sure Carla and Corina have lost that as well.
You want to say something, Karina? I actually would need to see the question. I was requesting it in the chat from the panelist crew, if that would be possible.
I can read it again while they do that. How does the concept of bioregions work for urban settings? How can we build a bioregional community in a heavily urbanized environment? We have about 2 minutes or so.
Well, I'll throw something out and see if you get inspired, Karina. So I live here in Cochin. It's a very urban place. There's the hills, but I don't live there. I live just south of the lake. But again, we're talking about a different scale, and the hills actually are just right there. They're not that far. And urban centers are nested within natural landscapes, fortunately, still. Not enough natural landscape. Too much of it, in my opinion, has been consumed by concrete and tall buildings and things below ground as well. But cities didn't used to look the way they are now, and they don't have to continue to look this way. I'm a permaculturalist too, and we dream a lot about the transformation of a cityscape. I'm not going to try and describe to you what that could look right now, because of course it would be determined by every single place, right? That's the point. There's not a cookie cutter process. There's not a cookie cutter outcome, except that the thing that does apply everywhere is the values that we use to guide how we go about doing anything like that. But we are, as cities, nested within a broader landscape and natural ecosystems without a built environment. And I think that there's lots of room for our creative imagination, for our willful spirits, for the love of the earth and our 7 generations to come, that we would find ways to transition what our cityscape look like and realign a new set of economies with the cycles and rhythms of Mother Earth. I don't even mean to kind of spew MG language. I think that's what it is. We have to align ourselves in that way. And we're at the beginning of that process. And I don't think we need to have every detail worked out in order to start our journey in that direction. Karina?
Yeah, can I just really oversimplify this? If we take the city of Oakland, and there's East Oakland, and there's Deep East Oakland, which we know is different, right? And we know there's the Oakland Hills, and we know that there is the Lake District, and we know that there's West Oakland. Those are all different regions within the same city that could really be broken down into those bioregions that you're talking about. If everyone had access to the flowing water that actually comes into the city of Oakland, and we opened up all the creeks and nobody had water rights, but everybody had the right to water, that we would be able to do those things. And so we would be able, in one city, break it up into 4 or 5 different places that you can be a bioregion. So that I'm just simplistically, you could do it because it's already done, really. People live in particular regions in a city right now. And so I'm just going to leave it like that and let you imagine in your own cities, wherever you live, every city is broken up like that. And so imagine the beauty that we could bring into deep Oakland, where that's where I live right now, who needs some love for a very long time. And by creating these places where everybody had the opportunity to grow. And I know that there's people that talk about resiliency hubs, and of course, Segurite Lantrup is creating stuff that we call Hametka, which is in our own language, a place where we all gather, that will allow people to have things in cases of natural or man-made disasters. But we need to have on a larger scale, how do we take care of one another? And I think the bioregion is a great way for us to dream about doing that in a very short time, because I think we need to do it now.
Thank you. Unfortunately, we're at the end of our session today, y'all. So I just want to say thank you again to Karina, Carla, and Mateo. It was such an honor and a pleasure and super humbling to work on this session with you all. I just want to go through our takeaways really quick. I was going to pull the slide up, but that takes me a minute because it's not my best. Like I shared, I'm not the best at that. So what we had said we hoped you would take away today was with a definition of bioregion, an understanding of bioregion as a land and water territory whose limits are defined by the geographical limits of human communities and ecological systems. And then understanding of bioregions reflecting the scale of relationship, social organization, and governance. And then we shared the example of Puerto Rico as showing how being organized bioregionally creates the opportunity for ecological justice. And then we ended with talking about how eco-literacy is needed on all scales. So before we go, we want to thank everyone who joined today, all of you who joined from across the world for sitting here and listening and feeling our presenters and our performers today. Thank you to our ASL interpreters, Deb and Juan, our Spanish interpreters, Andreina and Florencia, Yuki, our graphic note taker, and then of course, all the folks again, holding it down behind the scenes. This was our third session in the course correction series. So bring your homies out to join us for our last session, which is Tuesday, July 14th at 3 p.m. Pacific, 6 p.m. Eastern, where we'll be transported into the future to look back at how we won the shifts needed for a just transition. So for more information about that and to register, you can go to movementgeneration.org/course. And you can also find information about our previous sessions there. Finally, if you registered, be on the lookout for a follow-up email with group discussion questions and short readings, along with a video recording of today's session, including the transcript, as well as the Spanish audio recording. Also, please check out Segurite Land Trust. We've dropped the link in the chat a few times, and make a donation, please, if you're able. All right, folks, good night, good evening, and we'll see you in 2 weeks. All power to the people.
If Sabato was here, you would not pass. Though he's gone, we'll still not fail. This land is not for